Hello everybody, this is Jamie from my back porch, and today we are talking about lacquer and primer. Actually, we're talking about this LuxeLacquer primer, and we're going to talk about the LuxeLacquer right here. And I want to give you a couple tips on things that we can do, things that you should do, things that will make it easier. And I'm probably going to focus more on the primer part because that is the part that I have had some issues with. Not really issues, but it's a learning curve. And I wanted to share that with you so you don't have that learning curve. So let me get to that. Okay, this is my the LuxeLacquer primer. And it comes in white, and we're gonna open this up. This here is an oil-based primer, so when you use it, you need to have your mineral spirits nearby. You need to have some gloves, which I don't have here nearby, so I will get some in just a second. So here it is. You can smell it too. So I have some doors open and I'm good. So I have this brush here. This is Amy Howard's, I guess it's 1.5 inch brush. I also have the 3-inch brush here. And these work well. This works well on a really large surface. So if you're doing a tabletop or a desktop like what I'm doing, this is good. Doing smaller parts, this right here is a really good brush. You don't want to get too much paint. I've used this brush here, but it kind of leaves lines. So down here, these lines, this is not a soft enough bristle for me to really get a good smooth finish. You're gonna see that I use this brush here. This is a Stalemaster brush. It has a bend in it, and when you see the desk that I've painted, you'll know why I used that. You don't have to use this one. You can always take one and bend it, but it looks like they did a hard time. And then my actually favorite one was just this little bitty brush. I have some little spots that I was doing, and it seemed to have gone on the smoothest with that. And I don't know what kind of bristles these are, but I really liked that one. But that was my little bitty one. Oh, and I already have a bristle from one of my brushes in here. So I'm gonna take that out. So I wanna show you, look how thick this is. This is very thick. You know, we're used to the nice thin paint. This is nice and thick, so you're gonna want to thin it out. The best way to thin it out is, number one, not leave it in the can, because then you're gonna mess with everything else in the can. So what I do is I take this and I put it in a smaller cup. So we're gonna go ahead, if I had a spoon here, I'd do that. This is messy. So I'm gonna pour a little of this. I don't need much, I just need just a little bit left. Put the rest of this paint back in my paint cans so that I can close it up. Because this does dry actually pretty quick. You're gonna want to let it dry overnight. I would say 12 to 24 hours depending upon the humidity. And we're supposed to get rain in the next couple of days, so I am pushing it on getting this done. So there, I have done that. Now I have this here. This is my odorless mineral spirits. I go through this stuff like water sometimes, especially when you're using the the oil-based paint. So I'm gonna open this little guy up, big guy actually. And I'm just gonna put a splash in there. I don't have a whole lot, and I might have actually put a little too much, but we'll see. So then I just stir, and I stir, and I stir, and I make sure to get that all in there, because this is going to make it, number one, easier to put on. Number two, so it doesn't have as many brush strokes, or not brush strokes, but where you can see where the brush has been painted. What you want this to do is you want it, when you paint it, to then flow over where all of your brush marks are and cover them up. This is your foundation. This is one of the products that you use to really get yourself a good foundation for what you're doing. So some of the steps that you need to do, let me come back up here. Some of the steps that you need to do as far as before you do the primer on your piece, you're gonna want to sand it really good. If you're starting out fresh, these are my sanding things that go on my sander, but I use them too. So this is 150. This is really good to get all your bumps out, depending upon what you're doing. If it's a glossy piece, if it's another oil base, or some sort of if it's lacquered, you need to find out what kind of lacquer it is. You don't want to mix materials and mess things up. But what the primer is essentially doing is it's covering your surface, it's adhering to the piece. So you want to make sure that it's going to adhere. So if this is your first coat, you want to sand it real good, get it nice and smooth. If you've got bumps and all kinds of stuff, divots, you need to go in and use a wood filler. I have this, all my pink stuff dried up, so I went and bought this. So you want to fill it, let it dry, sand it. So if you're filling in holes, like where you have your hardware, you're going to want to do that. Then you're going to want to go back in and go with a 220 grit, and that's going to smooth it out even more, because you don't want, you know, the roughness of this. You want the smooth, and these are messy. These are used. And so then once you get that all done, then you're going to take a cloth and you're going to wipe that baby down. You want to wipe it down good. I'd also maybe at this point use your clean slate and go in and make sure that you don't have any oil or grease or anything on there. So this is your main coat. This is your primer. This is your, can't think of the word, but this is very important. What you have underneath will always show on top. So if it's a rough surface underneath, it's going to be more of a surface like this on top. So if you can get it smooth, that's what you want to do. So now we're going to go in and we're going to use this primer, and we are going to, I'm going to show you several different ways to do it, and then what you can do once it dries. Okay, so I now have some leftover pieces of wood from another sample I did. This one has the, it has a sticky, so we don't want to use that. So here's black. The piece that I painted over on was black. So here we have raw wood, and here we have a painted piece. So we have a painted piece of furniture. So on the painted piece, just to make sure it's nice and clean, I'm gonna go, and if you can see the way the grain is, I'm gonna go and sand it, get it to where it's nice and smooth. Where's my little, there it is. I have this little sanding block. The sandpaper on that goes away really fast, but I wrap I wrapped my sandpaper around it. So that was with the 150, so we got it roughed up here pretty good. So let's go back with the 220. And this one I have used on a green piece that I've lacquered. So it's gonna show a little green. I'm shaking the whole table, I'm sorry. Okay, this feels much smoother. So if I was to, I'm gonna clean this off, then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna use a little of our clean slate. Let me find a clean. Okay, so here's our clean slate. So I'm just gonna clean it. And by doing this, it gets the dust off. It gets it nice and clean so we know that we are working with a good, clean piece. So we're gonna let that dry for just a second. Sorry, that's my little dog lady barking at the neighbor dog. She probably will continue for a minute. So since we're doing a small sample here, I am gonna go into this. Oh, one tip that my dad taught me, I've already been messing with this, but to take your brush and before you use the oil-based LuxeLacquer or the primer, to dip it in the odorless mineral spirits, and by doing that, it soaks up all the liquid from the mineral spirits. So when you put it in your brush, you're not gonna have as much paint coming up into the brush. So it'll make it easier to clean. So you see how we've got these little lines here? So I've added a little bit more. So I've painted it on, and then I want to go back and just really lightly go over it, and then I'm going to want to leave it. But see, I'm getting some see-through. I'm getting some of these, you see these lines? As it dries, those lines should minimize. And after it dries, I will go back and I will sand that down, and I'll do another coat of primer. So we'll go ahead and put 2 here so we can have one that will be dry, and then we'll have one that I can sand and we'll go over it again so you can see how I've done that. See, I got something in there already. Put a little bit more. I found when I was working with it that if I put on a little bit more and didn't put it as thin, and of course that was my second coat that I did that on, that there was more of it to flow and it worked better. So there's those examples. Now I want to show you, I have another piece that I did that was on raw wood. Now you don't want to go and paint your LuxeLacquer on raw wood because it's going to soak that up, and again your surface isn't very smooth. So we're going to go back in, and I sanded down with, you know, my 150. I came back with my 220 and I got it nice and smooth. And then, so this was on a piece that I was working on, and got it nice and smooth where I didn't have any bumps. The problem with the piece I was working on had a lot of grain to it. So when it has a lot of grain, that grain is going, unless you sand all that grain completely down, it's going to be there. So if you're working with a piece, you know, maybe oak or something like that, it's going to be a little bit harder. But we have a pretty smooth surface here. So when you paint with your primer on the wood, it's gonna soak up faster. You're gonna use more paint, but by doing that, you are setting it up to to do the lacquer on it really well. So if you were putting lacquer straight on the wood, it would suck that up. It wouldn't work as well. So that's how we're gonna do that. But if you'll see, it goes on nice and smooth here. Now I'm gonna show you, if you don't use the, move that over. If you don't use your mineral spirits, let me show you how hard it is to work with. And I did this the first time and it took half the can. It went on, but I was working, it just took so much more paint. So it still covers well. But doing it with the primer worked better. See, already I can tell that here I have a lot of lines. Here it's already going over and smoothing. But one thing with the wood, when you get that liquid on there, you see how it lifts up. I don't know if you can see those little bumps on here. It lifts them up. Anytime you go over wood, it's gonna lift those fibers up. So when it's done drying, you're gonna wanna sand that down and go back over it again. So I'm getting lines on this, and a lot of that is how I'm doing it. But the first one, you're gonna have more lines. The second one, you're going over the prime surface and it's already nice and clean and sanded down, and all those fibers that would stick up are done. So that's what it looks like to get our first coat on. So I'm gonna show you here in a minute what it looks like once this is dried, and then how we do our second coat of primer and give you some more tips. Okay, I am going to show you real quick how I clean my brushes, because if I have to wait till tomorrow, I have to clean these brushes. So I'm pouring in some nice clean paint thinner, and not paint thinner, mineral spirits. If you see this, look, this brush is not, it doesn't come out just like our water-based does. I've got a lot of stuff in there. So I'm gonna come in with I'm gonna put down a paper towel, and I have a steel brush, and I'm going to comb my brush, and I'm gonna put it back in here, clean it. I'm gonna comb it again, and no, I think that's coming out of my brush, this thing, not my brush. But that oil paint is going to get stuck up there in your brushes, and you, especially way up high in there. And if you comb it out, you're getting a lot of that out. And then I'm gonna rinse it and rinse it. Then I'm gonna do that probably 3 times. I already see that my brushes feel cleaner. So I'm gonna do that one more time. Make sure they're nice and clean, because have you ever tried to clean a brush when you had oil-based paint and the next day you come out and your brush is solid? I have. So then I'm gonna get a little bit more clean. So that's fresh. This is now dirty. And I'm gonna wipe that off, and then I'm gonna put it in here. And this is kind of like, I would say, kind of my wash. It doesn't have a lot of paint in it. And that has cleaned my brush out really, really nicely. So then I take a clean brush, a clean paper towel, and I'm gonna dry it off nice and good. Squeeze that, get as much of that out. And now my brush is nice and soft again. I don't have any paint in there, and I can set it out to dry. So I'm gonna do that with this one here too, and I'm gonna get this one cleaned off, and they'll be ready for the next time. Okay, we're gonna go back over these, and remember this was our raw wood piece, and this was one where I painted it a little thinner and painted it a little thicker. So I want you to see, really you feel, I haven't sanded, but the one where it's thicker it's really quite a bit smoother. It looks like that, but it's the thinner, where I painted thinner, it feels, you know how your fingernails get those ridges? It feels like it has ridges. And this is much smoother. So I put it on a little extra thick here, and I really like how that looks. Now with the wood, it's very rough because all of those little particles pulled up. So I'm gonna go in with my sandpaper. Now this time I'm starting with 220 because I'm not trying to get down into it. And be careful when you sand this because you don't really want to inhale it. I actually have my sander hooked up to my shop vac. So every time I turn on my sander, I turn on my shop vac, and it sucks up all the dust and it keeps my shop much cleaner. So that's a whole lot smoother. Let me see. My table is getting super messy, y'all. Here we go. Now this one, it's a 500. I don't think you need a 500 grit, but I don't have a 300 right here. But this will make it nice and smooth. It's just barely getting, oh yeah, that's nice and smooth. This is what I'm gonna go back over on my lacquer. So remember, I'm gonna, oh yeah, that's like glossy smooth. I don't feel the ridges as much, so that's good. So then what I'm gonna do is, oh great, I just cleaned those brushes, didn't I? Well, we're gonna do it one more time. I saved my lacquer, and not my lacquer, my primer. And we're gonna go over this one more time. And I'm gonna leave it. I'm not gonna keep painting over it because the more I paint over it, the more brush strokes and brush marks I'll get. So we'll see, we'll compare. This is the one where it was thinner, and this is the one where I did it thicker. And then here's the one on the wood. And get my dust off. Didn't have very much. And I'm just gonna do half of this. See how smooth that goes on? Okay, so that's on. So our next thing we'll do is we'll go in and we will look at how these ended up. And then we're gonna put some of the white LuxeLacquer that I'm working on. And I've got my table, I've got my desk about done. It's drying just a little bit more, and then I'm gonna show you my final product. Okay, so these pieces have dried now. And I'm gonna go in and we're gonna do this last step and do our lacquer. So I'm gonna go back in. Sorry about my dog. got all the doors open because we need ventilation. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to sand this until it is nice and smooth. The difference between these two was this one is quite a bit smoother, and this one still has quite a few ridges in it. I don't know if you can see that. You see the ridges in there. So I'm having to sand more. And the difference in these two was this one, I put it on a little bit thicker, and it seems to be working easier. And then on our wood piece, this was where it was just one coat. This was the second coat of our primer. And it feels so soft after you've sanded it. But I'm still seeing quite a few ridges. So chances are on this, I would have to go back and sand it a little bit better. Now that I've got two coats, sand it down nice and smooth, which is going to take a lot more time. And then come back and do one more coat. So on our wood, it may take 3 coats. But once you get that done, you can go with your LuxeLacquer, and really one coat is really all you're going to need. So I have some of my, my lacquer, and this is LuxeLacquer. It's brilliant white, and it matches the primer pretty good. I did let it set out just a little bit longer, so it's a little bit thicker. So one thing I noticed when I did paint my piece is that it had lines in it and a few little bubbles when I painted it. I don't know if y'all can see that. Let's see if we can get a little closer. I don't know if you can see the bubbles or not. Maybe. There's some right there. Those bubbles will go away. So we'll go ahead and paint our other spot here. The one that I didn't do as thick. And I'm being pretty generous with my paint here. It's a flat surface. If you're going vertically, you're going to want your paint to be a little bit thicker when you do vertically, or it's going to run pretty easily on you. So there, so this is, see how shiny that lacquer is? You can see the, I mean, it's immediately shiny. So I have, the one on the bottom has a whole lot more ridges than the one on the top. The one on the top looks much better. So as that dries, I've noticed on my other piece that it looks pretty good. So I don't have the handles yet on my piece, but I'm going to go ahead and take you off here and show you my desk. So there it is. So it has 3 drawers, and these legs were hard to paint, but got them done. And there's the top, and it's just nice and glossy. It still has more time to dry, but I can see a reflection in it. So I did not have a before piece, but it was actually just painted black. So we went from black to white. So I hope you like my finished piece, and God bless everyone.